Well, hi, David. I'm really happy to meet you. Thanks for talking with me today.
Yeah, thank you for the invite. Great to join you.
Oh, I'm thrilled to talk to you. Lots I want to talk to you about. I know that you write and you teach about being an engaged neighbor or about neighboring in general, I suppose. So I think I would love you to talk about how you define an engaged neighbor and how you came to this work in the first place.
Yeah, well, maybe we start there first about how I
Yeah,
came to it and then
sure,
jump into the engaged neighbor part.
sure.
So, if you had asked me if I was a good neighbor back in 2018, I would have told you yes. And I knew that because I pick up after my dog on walks. The police had never been called to my house for a loud party. I waved at people. I took down my Christmas lights before January 1. So I always said, yes, I am a great neighbor. Um, but over a series of a couple of events where people had spoke about what it means to love your neighbor, and I had left both of those instances thinking, well, this doesn't really apply to me because I'm already a great neighbor. And
Mhm.
then a friend of my sister in law's handed me a book called The Art of Neighboring by Dave Runyon. And I wasn't even done with chapter one yet. And I was saying, oh my, I'm a horrible neighbor. Because what I saw in that, what he emphasizes in that first name is knowing and using the names of your immediate neighbors.
Mhm.
And I could see in my own life and trajectory changes with kids and moving and just life gets busy. And here we were, we'd lived in this house for 15 years at that point, and other neighbors had come and gone and moved away. When the new ones moved in, I didn't even bother to get to know their name, or if they told me, I didn't remember it.
Mhm.
And it's not that I was rude. I waved at neighbors, I smiled and all that. um, but we were quiet and we kind of stuck to ourselves. And I just realized in that moment after in reading that book, I'm like, I actually only know the name of one of my neighbors. I guess I'm not such a good neighbor. This is not what
Mhm.
that means. So literally my wife and I agreed that this was not the best way to be living, that we needed to really work on developing those connections and relationships. And we did the stereotypical plate of cookies
Mhm.
to introduce ourselves. And I rang doorbells, which, that can be a little intimidating to ring a doorbell, someone who's lived in a house for 5 years and you've never spoken to them. Now you're ringing a doorbell and you're handing a plate of cookies, all of your contact information. And I was just honest. I just said to people, we haven't been the neighbor that we should have been. And we want to make connections. Here's our contact information. We want to do a better job.
Wow.
Now, I always tell people the plate of cookies may not sound like a big sacrifice, but my wife makes outstanding chocolate chip cookies, and she rarely makes them, usually just for special events. And so here I was giving them away. So that was a big
That
sacrifice.
is.
And I can say that everybody received that warmly. I did have one older neighbor
Mhm.
who barely cracked the door. She took the cookies and said, "How much do I owe you for this?"
Mhm.
So it was a reminder too that they weren't accustomed to this sort of outreach and connection either.
Yeah.
And no neighbor the next day sent me a text saying, I want to be best friends. That's not how that happened. My neighboring is a crock pot, not a microwave. And
Mhm.
it's a slow, continual application of heat and a slow, continual effort. But it was the starting point for us because
Mhm.
we just came to that point. We just realized that I thought I loved my neighbor because I would have said love. The opposite of love was hate,
Right.
but actually the opposite of love is apathy. And we had and had demonstrated apathy toward those living around us.
Mhm.
So we set out on our own personal mission to do better in 2018 and building those relationships and working in our own neighborhood, which didn't have any sort of culture of connectivity at all.
Mhm.
And so it was really kind of that personal mission. And then at some point, I think in 2019, it kind of had this light bulb where I said, I think this is kind of community development. on the local grassroots area. And that's what I do for a living. I work as a community development specialist for the
Mm.
University of Missouri Extension.
Mhm.
And so, really trying to look for ways to apply this to my work. And one of the first things I was encouraged to do was to do some research, reading, research, and interviews to determine if there was a growing interest in neighboring, what research was being done. And so that part was what caused me to name the university program the Engaged Neighbor Program,
Okay.
because we really wanted this idea of engagement, not just
Mhm.
apathy.
Mhm.
And so one of the studies that we did one in 2022 and 2024, a statewide, we call it the State of Neighboring in Missouri study. And we asked some different questions both years, but one year we asked the same question, and that was what makes someone a good neighbor. And
Mhm.
we gave people these different behaviors to pick from, like, parks their car on the driveway, not the road,
Mhm.
keeps their garage door shut, these things that a lot of neighborhoods, suburban neighborhoods will
Yeah.
require, but also about is willing to loan a tool or checks on the elderly neighbor, or behaviors as
Mhm.
well. And both years, the top two traits of what makes someone a good neighbor
Mhm.
in Missouri, and I would say probably the United States, right?
Mhm.
The top two traits are someone who's quiet and respects my privacy. In other words, in America, we now say a good neighbor is someone who's quiet and leaves me alone. And so this is the other reason I didn't want to talk about good neighbor, but I want to talk
Mhm.
about being an
Engage.
engaged neighbor, because it's really
Yeah.
about connections and relationship.
Yeah.
That's truly how you demonstrate love.
I just love that word engaged, and I know in my work in schools and in community development and engagement at my school with the parents in my role, we talked about even the words parent involvement, and we changed it to parent engagement because involving can mean lots of things, and it can mean some very passive things, but we really like that word engagement. And so I love that you're connecting that with being a good neighbor. So I think that's a perfect word for it. And so in your course that you teach, and I think it's really interesting, I guess, just as an aside in a way, that you were already working in community development, and then you were doing just this personal work in your own neighborhood. And then you started to see connections, it sounds like, to your actual work. So if I think I've read that you then did you kind of approach the university and say, this is, or like you were, I guess that's why you did the surveys and you did some research to see if there was interest in neighboring. So in your course, I guess I'd love to know who takes it. Like what are the main demographics and what are the main components of your course, just in sort of chunks. If you had to chunk it out, I'm interested in that.
Sure. Well, it's been a process since 2019. Um, I would say the program doesn't look like I had totally envisioned in 2019.
Mhm.
I think, but can be a good thing. When I originally approached my supervisor about the idea, he said, I'll give you 5% of your time to do research and interviews and
Wow.
work.
Yeah.
Okay. But really, at the time, I felt like that was a good show of support and interest.
Mhm.
This doesn't work this way very often, because I already had set curriculums and things I was doing, programs we did for cities and um, leadership courses that we taught. Extension in the United States, the extension program is all about non-credit,
Mhm.
community-based education.
Okay, I was going to ask you about that.
So a lot of times our class is a one-time thing, but there are times it could be a series of three or four or more, um, always in person prior to COVID. Since COVID now, there's a lot of hybrid models, online and in person both, and things. And you get a lot of one-off opportunities where a community wants you to come in for half a day for a workshop or something
Mhm.
like that. So there's a lot of those examples.
Mhm.
And so originally, as I researched and looked, I had proposed a online class that was going to be 6 parts. We're going to call it Neighboring 101. And then with the idea of that we might roll out a more advanced course, 201, 301,
Mhm.
something like that, to engage people around this idea.
Mhm.
And so we rolled out that first class. And again, I was just going to repeat that. I was just going to roll those same 6 uh, modules over and over and over. And so by week 2, we had almost 400 people in that class from all over the United States.
Mm.
And so we're getting to the end of the class, and everybody's saying, "Well, we're not going to stop, are we? Isn't this going to continue?" And so in that moment, again, it was kind of this idea of throwing things against the wall to see what sticks,
Mhm.
if you've heard
Yeah.
that idiom
Yeah.
before.
Yeah.
And so we were still in that, I was still in that uh, development mindset of what is this going to look like. And so, um, with approval from my regional director, we made the decision for Neighboring 101 to become more ongoing, not just 6 courses that would roll over and over and over, since we already had that interest group. And so so that in itself turned into something that I hadn't originally envisioned. It turned into something else. And so that's still ongoing. We're like 6 years in. We meet once a month. We have over 1,000 people that have paid the fee and enrolled in that course, that program.
Mhm.
Um, they don't all attend live anymore. It kind of depends on the speaker, the guest, or the topic. Some generate more live attendance than others. Um, most of the classes will get the class video will get 500 views afterwards. So it's really kind of a network, I guess, more than a class, I think is how I would probably describe that now. But then there's been other spinoffs from that. We do a 10-week fall program called Neighborhood Leadership Academy,
Mhm.
which is offered statewide and helping people develop leadership skills that they can take back to their neighborhood or their community. Uh, we have some events now that we really promote heavily, something called Show Me Neighborhood Art Week, which is
Yes.
in June. It's the idea of creating art with your neighbors and displaying it publicly for
Yeah,
a
I was going
week.
to ask
And
you
then
about that. Hmm.
people vote on that, and we have prizes all over the state for that. Um, I was also able to get legislation passed in Missouri for Missouri Good Neighbor Week, and it begins on National Good Neighbor Day, which is September 28th, and it runs to October 4th. And so we encourage acts of kindness. We have a nomination project where you can nominate someone as Missouri's most engaged neighbor, and we recognize them. There's cash prizes. You report your own acts of neighboring, and we do a random drawing and give out gift cards and stuff for people that have reported their own acts of neighboring. Last year, we had over 31,000 acts of neighboring reported during that week. And so our goal is 35,000 this year in Missouri. So that's an activity that kind of grew out of the program. So again, I was able to kind of start with a clean slate, which is kind of
Mhm.
intimidating.
Yeah.
Um, and a lot of that slate has changed, maybe not what I'd originally envisioned, but I'd say the Engaged Neighbor Program is more this umbrella with all these different components and activities under it now. And I'm
Okay.
sure there's a couple others that I'm forgetting right here in the moment.
So, well, first of all, I guess I'm just sort of, were you shocked at the interest? Because, when you say you've done these the surveys and people said, being quiet and keeping to yourself is the number one, those are the number one and two qualities. And then yet you have all these people interested in neighboring. So to me, it seems almost, it's surprising. Were you surprised at how
Yeah.
many people are interested?
Well, we rolled out the class, of course, before I had done the large research study and realized, you know, that's how people felt, what they wanted to see in a good neighbor. But
Mhm.
even at that, when I rolled out the first course, my original pitch to my boss was I think if I market this heavy and do some guest speaking in the area and really promote this heavily, I think we can get 10 people in a class. That was my pitch.
Yeah.
And an extension, and especially in a lot of rural Missouri areas, depending on the topic. If you're doing a agriculture topic, you may have 100 people in the room, but other topics, if we have 10 people in the audience, that's worth our time. I mean, that's
Yeah.
a good impact. And so that's kind of why I leaned into that number, but that's really what I expected. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, when it became 300 and word got out across the nation somehow and people were enrolling from everywhere, I'm like, okay, this is turning into something else. And
So can I ask you a little bit more about that marketing? Because I think of,
well, you're let's not I would love to be able to take all the credit for being a marketing visionary, but I don't think that's what you're going to hear when you ask me this question.
well, I'm just so curious, like you said, and I'm thinking about this, because my passion has been community and community development and social health and wellness for decades. And so I always wonder, what comes first, kind of. And if I tend to think that awareness, for myself, once I started years ago, realizing the benefits to connecting with each other and to nurturing social health, the benefits to our health and our happiness, I just thought everybody has to know this. This is so important. So with what you did, I'm so curious if you said you went and you spoke about it in person. Did you talk about the sort of science behind it, about the benefits, or did you talk of like how do you think you got so many people interested in it, I guess?
Well, my speaking was all local originally, and the short answer to how I got so many people in the class is dumb luck. And but we can come back to that. I think, and part of that dumb luck is just the fact that the way that this topic hit my heart, I personalized it, and I had personal stories to
Mhm.
tell, and then became engaged with it as sort of a training or a teaching opportunity. And I was just fortunate enough to kind of be a little bit ahead of the curve. Not that
Mhm.
I saw this coming or that I'm this great visionary. That's not the case.
Yeah.
I think that's part of where the dumb luck comes in. I was just kind of ahead of the curve. So when we opened up Neighboring 101, we were talking even prior about some
Right.
other examples around the nation of neighboring engagement types of programs that are bubbling up and efforts and things. And that's becoming fairly common now. It's a shared language, a lot of
Yeah.
interest in the subject. That wasn't the case then. I think just a little dumb luck. I was maybe the first one out of the chute, or one of the first ones maybe available on that. So that
Mhm.
attracted a lot of the attention. And locally, when I speak, I was speaking to chambers of commerce. I was speaking to Sertoma clubs and Lions clubs, and just places I knew needed regular speakers. That's where I was trying to go to gauge interest. And I was making those presentations very much personal, very our story and what we had done in our neighborhood and what we saw happen as a result,
Mhm.
and really that personal perspective.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important question to ask still when people maybe contact me and want to talk about neighboring. I try to make one of my first questions, tell me what you're doing
Mhm.
with your immediate neighbors,
Mhm.
because I do think that's where it begins. It's
Yeah.
learn the names of your immediate neighbors, find ways to use the names of your immediate neighbors, and do some sort of connection events, not
Mhm.
to entertain them, but to build connection and relationship.
Right.
And your neighbors can end up being more than the immediate eight that live around you, but
Right.
it should never be less than that.
Right.
Because otherwise it's real easy to say everyone in town is my neighbor. I
Mhm.
I'm neighboring all the time. I didn't, I let that person cut in front of me in traffic. I'm such a good neighbor. And
Mhm.
then go back to our house and shut our garage door and never even speak to the people that live around us.
Mhm.
And the ones that live right next door to us, that's where it begins. That's And so if that's not your initial focus to where you've done it, then I would contend you're really not neighboring. You're maybe
Yeah.
community developing,
Yes.
but you're not neighboring. And
Mhm.
so that's one of my first questions, and that's really been where it all bloomed for me and led to these other avenues.
Mm, that's amazing. I can't believe well, I'm so glad so many people are interested in this and taking part in the activities. So
It's
just going,
growing,
yeah, it's
growing
amazing.
nationwide. Yeah,
Yeah. So you were talking about Good Neighbor Week, and so do you have you have people nominate good neighbors, and then do you have a series of events during that week?
we do. And this is one of those good examples. I would have loved for that to have been Missouri Engaged Neighbor Week. Um, but I didn't see the final
Mm.
wording on the bill when it got introduced, and the state representative took a little. Uh, this is not a criticism. I was going to say just a little license to say
Yes,
good neighbor, but that is
mm,
such a common word. That is how people say it too.
that's right.
And so um, and that was a pure miracle and stuff that got through the legislature in the first
Yeah.
year. It's a kind of amazing story and got signed on the last day. And but in all of the language and things that we do in it, we try to use that word engaged neighbor. And so
Mm,
the nominations are to nominate someone who is Missouri's most engaged neighbor. So
mm,
everyone who gets nominated gets a letter letting them know they've been nominated, which is, encouraging, I think, to know that your work is seen and that you're
mm,
appreciated for something you've done. They also get a memento that relates back to Missouri Good Neighbor
mhm.
Week. And then um, that week before the week begins, we actually look at all of our nominations that have come in. We had 122 nominations last year.
Wow.
Um, and there's a small group that sorts through those and tries to pick 10 winners. Last year, we could not agree. We picked 18 and we had to go find another sponsor to help with the cash prizes because we send them a book and we send them $100 cash prize and a certificate to, and then, we try to use their name. We try to, in media releases, we trumpet their efforts a little bit as an example of an
Mhm,
engaged neighbor, not
mhm,
someone who's just doing like community work, but someone
mhm,
who's actually engaged with their neighbors.
mhm, mhm.
And you get more of what you celebrate. And so we try to celebrate what that looks like, what that means to be an engaged neighbor. So that's a component of Missouri Good Neighbor Week. But we
Mhm.
also ask people to submit and report on their acts of neighboring in their community and how many people they impacted with those activities. And then we introduced last year a city competition where cities are able to earn points from the number of nominations that come from their city, from the acts of neighboring that are reported from their city, whether or not their city issued a proclamation for Missouri Good Neighbor Week, whether or not there was an organized event or activity in the city. And they're all competing to earn points to be named one of Missouri's most neighborly cities.
Oh,
And
fantastic.
we award four of those based on the award, um, the city sizes as
Mhm.
determined by the Missouri Municipal League. Um, and so we have four size categories and we recognize those cities. And that I think is a real popular item as well.
Oh, fantastic. And the Neighborhood Art Week, so how does that work? You just encourage people to display, is there certain criteria for the art you want displayed? And how
It
does
is
that
not,
work?
we have tried to really encourage amateur art, and
Yeah.
kid art. We've not had too many of those. We love it when things are recycled and reused. This grew out of a program in Springfield, Missouri called Lawn, which stood for Lawn Art with Neighbors, and
Oh,
it launched during COVID, and some extension was involved with that, and the art museum, and some art teachers, and uh, asking people to create this public art, and had a little tour online where you could drive around, you'd see the address, you go look at public art, and that fizzled after year two, and so extension picked it up and kind of do it statewide. Uh, the one difference that we introduce is we do pick winners. We do have regional winners that we award, but we still maintain a, a website that includes all the addresses and the maps. So I don't think people are going to drive around the state and see these, but they're going to go look at some that are close to them, right? And to kind of pull in a larger pool of
Mhm.
participants as
Yeah.
well. Um,
And
in my neighborhood, the last couple of years, we've gotten some of our neighbors together with a square of wood, and everybody's painted their own barn quilt. If you're
oh, yes.
familiar with what those are, and then we have a um, something at one of the roads that comes into our neighborhood, some old picket fence, and we attach these barn quilts together on the fence to
Mm.
decorate each year. That's been our theme because barn quilts kind of show an individual's
Yeah.
individual character,
Hmm.
and at the same time it's displayed together like a neighborhood. So it's a good reminder that we're all individuals in
Beautiful.
this neighborhood.
Does
So
that
that's
happen? Does it happen during Good Neighbor Week, or is it a
no, it
separate?
happens in June.
Okay.
This takes place in June. We tried to kind of spread some of those things out. Um, and then for a few years, we did Won't You Be Our Neighbor Day in March, which is Mr. Rogers' birthday, March
Hmm.
20th. Um, but there's some sponsorship challenges that come with that and things. So we've backed away from that. And then this year, I've been introducing and we've been kind of promoting something called Out and About.
Yeah.
And you can see the website at outabout.org.
Hmm.
Um, and a friend that has created that and created some marketing materials, this idea, and it really centers around one of these things we've talked about in neighboring circles a lot. A, how to motivate people to take action. Is there
Hmm.
something that's unifying? Like if we all did X, would more people get involved with neighboring and things? And we haven't seen that. And what's the single motivator? Well, there doesn't seem to be a single motivator. How do we take away some of the other limitations or excuses for not doing this? And one of the things we decided to focus on here is setting a standard date and time. So you don't have to look at a calendar and wonder and kick it down the road and delay until you come up with something. So with Out and About, we just settled on this idea of the first Sunday evening of every month, 6 to 8 p.m.
Hmm.
Either be out walking your neighborhood, out and about that way, or be a host, a beacon on your driveway. And maybe you just do lawn chairs. I do lawn chairs and soda pop. Um, and it's really just a connection, conversation type of thing. So we're trying to, instead of uh, Mr. Rogers' birthday, we're really kind of promoting this out and about all year round as an ongoing way to uh, connect with neighbors, something that has a very low entry requirement.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's not, you're not planning a whole table or a dinner party. It's a very easy entry point.
Right.
And as people make connections, they may decide to do more beyond that, but we've got to
Right.
start somewhere. And I love the idea of starting on the driveway because for us, that's a lot of where it started for me and my wife on our driveway in our garage.
Yeah, that's great. And do you have quite a few visitors when you're out in your driveway?
Yeah, we had 15.
Ah,
This is in August. We had 15 at our August one in my town where I live, Republic, Missouri. There were three families here that hosted an out and about, and we all had similar attendance. 12. I think one of them had told me she had 14 adult 14 adults, 6 children, 10 dogs, and 2 chickens. So quite the menagerie that showed up there for theirs. So
oh,
um,
beautiful.
well, we hope to really see that expand
Yeah.
here in the coming years. We
Oh,
continue
it
to
sounds
press into that.
great. Sounds great. So I wondered if we could talk a little, switch a little bit into that idea of just some of your some of the things you write about, and maybe some things that you're noticing, maybe that a lot of us are noticing. One being disconnection. And
Yeah,
I know I write about this a lot, and you know, talking about, among other things, about, our nature is to be social, and that we're living so, sometimes I say, fiercely independently.
Mm,
And so I know you've written about disconnection too. And a recent post that I read, you were talking about barriers to why people don't connect as much anymore. And you added this new one, a fifth one that you called heart obstacles. And I just love this piece that you wrote. So I wondered if you could talk about that.
sure. I and really the first four on that list are really
Mhm.
categories that I had seen, I think, that come out pretty loudly in the research and the books that are coming out on the subject, and have used these as part of my presentation. And those being loneliness. When you're lonely, you're less likely to reach out. Busyness. The whole American life is hurried and full and overscheduled and overcommitted, and we're busy, and that's a common thing. The retreat mentality, the idea that after a long day we come home looking for a place to hide. For
Yeah.
our home becomes a fortress, not a front porch.
Mhm.
Regardless of architecture, we're
Mhm.
in a fortress. Retreat mentality, the entertainment focus, and it's like 24/7 almost. But between
Mhm.
phones and TVs and live streaming and Netflix, it's we have all the entertainment we want in the house. And when I speak to younger demographics, college kids, I usually say turn off Netflix and go outside. It's usually not received real well, but I still say it anyway, because it'd be much better for your health, physical and social health. And so those are kind of the ones that have always focused on, talked about. But I knew these others kind of existed in my own case, but I'd never really come up with a way to categorize them. And if I shared them one on one, it always seemed or sounded a little preachy when I did these presentations.
Mm.
And so I was looking for more of a unifying phrase, and that's the summer why I came up with what I call just heart obstacles. And
Mhm.
it's different than the busyness and the loneliness and the retreat. These heart obstacles are specifically fear, shame, an unwillingness to be vulnerable, and selfishness. And fear sometimes is fear of what's going on uh, in that house or that family across the street. Fear of what am I going to get into if I start making connections. Sometimes it's shame because we don't want people to know what's going on in our own house or in our own life. So shame can become a barrier that keeps us isolated. And even if we do open our door, sometimes we don't really want to be very vulnerable. We want to be sure we curate our life in person as careful as we do online. Everything's coming up roses and everything's beautiful, and it's this unwillingness to be vulnerable. But yet being vulnerable lots of times is the soil that really helps relationships grow and blossom.
Mhm.
And then the fourth category is selfishness. And there's been several authors that have used this word solely to define our change in neighboring relationships. But selfishness or self focus, uh, as a culture, we're pretty self absorbed. And and when I say this, it's an indictment on myself as well. Again, I'm uh, got a lot of years on me now, and and I spent at least 40 of those uh, not being an engaged neighbor.
Mhm.
So when I say selfishness, I'm not. If it appears that I'm pointing a finger, I realize I have three fingers pointing back at me. Uh, and I did make a lot of choices that were based in selfishness that kept us isolated. So those are the four words, phrases that kind of fit under this idea of heart obstacles that are, leading to further isolation and disconnection.
Mhm. So do you have suggestions for people to for all of us, not just others, but all of us. Like you say, you're not just pointing fingers at people, to move out of this place that we're in inside. And I know one thing comes to mind that you talk about starting small. Do you, what are your suggestions for this?
Yes, well, the starting small or the idea friendly approach, a lot of that is about finding a partner, finding another like minded person to join with you. So you're not doing these things alone.
Mm-hmm.
And also, the idea of starting small is instead of doing a potluck for the entire neighborhood, maybe you begin with just a small cookout for your immediate neighbors on your driveway, right?
Mm-hmm.
Get the experience, test the waters, gain some support from others, a co-conspirator or a co-worker on these things, so you're not going along. When you do a project by yourself, you can go fast, but if you want to go far and keep it sustainable, you need someone else to come with you, and the more the merrier, really. So I'm a big proponent of that of
Mm-hmm.
that type of approach. But the really the basics of getting started um, is taking those steps to learn the names of your neighbors,
Mm-hmm.
find ways to use the names of your neighbors, and do some connection events. So in my own life, what this looked like, I had to go learn the names of my neighbors. I had to ring doorbells and ask, and
Mm-hmm.
I am not good with remembering names. So we had a little tic-tac-toe board up on our refrigerator, this neighboring grid that other people have used, and we went back and we wrote down the names on that chart so I
Yeah.
could see them and help remember.
Mhm. It's a great idea.
And then I found excuses or ways to do a little more front yard living, to just be a little more available, to linger at the mailbox. We did for a while there, probably a couple of years with our kids. We did Friday night dinners on the driveway, and so we just took our meal that we'd be sitting at the table eating and took it out to the driveway and sat. And
Yeah.
people would come by and visit and
Mm.
stop their car and holler at us and
Yeah.
things. So it was just being present, being visible.
Mhm.
And that also gave me chances to use the names.
Mhm.
So I've heard their name, I've written down the name, memorized it. So next time I see my neighbor out, I can say, "Hey, Jeff," instead of
Mhm.
"Hey, you."
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it means I care. I'm wanting to have a relationship. I've paid attention, right? And
Yeah.
making myself more visible and available. And then doing some connection events. And we've done really low effort types of things. Donuts on the driveway, go and buy a box of donuts. That's been a go-to. My wife loves coffee, and so once a quarter we do a coffee event in our garage. And I always tell people, like, we serve up really bad cups of coffee. We use our Keurig, and I've got an assortment of different pods, and we make people a cup of coffee from a Keurig. So I
Yeah.
we had 45 last time on our quarterly. So I know people are not showing up for the coffee, uh, but it's the mechanism that gets them there, and they bring their mug, and they're showing up for the conversation, the connection.
Mm.
We have chairs out, and people sit around, visit, and so that's a low entryway. And I have seen by us doing these activities, it has helped other neighbors get out of their comfort zone to make connections with the neighbors around them. And I've
Mhm.
seen neighbors then reach out and help the neighbors around them further down the street. It's had this
Yeah.
ripple effect
Wonderful.
as well.
Yeah. Yeah, you kind of giving people permission, once they say you doing it, because it takes it takes some courage, especially I know after a few months and I see a certain neighbor and I think, "Oh my gosh, I should know that person's name." And now it's going to be so embarrassing to say, "What's your name again?" But like you did even with the cookies, you just came right out and said, "You know what? This is like we realize we want to be more connected and we want to do better." And I love that. But it takes vulnerability and some courage. It really does. Um
there's kind of a cultural opposition to it. Really, I
Yeah.
mean, part of the courage comes into play there is just kind of resisting this opposition to it. So
Oh,
many
yeah.
people are making choices of intentional isolation.
Yes.
The self checkout at the supermarket and the
Yes.
self service everything, and then coming home and putting down the um, what somebody call I heard somebody call it the isolation shield, which is the garage door.
Yes.
These
Yes.
specific choices. So it takes courage to
Yeah. It
run
does.
counter to the culture.
Yes. And we're almost being, it's like it's like we're being told that this is what we should do. Like being more independent is a good thing and that we can get everything in our homes and we don't need each other. And so it's a courage to go against those cultural messages that we're tending to get. What about, do you have a couple of stories, David, about how neighboring actions, being engaged with your neighbors has really helped someone or something that you saw that really warmed your heart? Do you have a couple of stories for us?
Yeah, gosh, if stories abound, somebody else or even in our own household.
Yeah,
I mean, I
anything.
can, I can use ourselves as examples,
Sure.
but we see other examples that come in through the Missouri Good Neighbor Week reporting. When people
Mm,
are telling stories, but also just the regular course of our work and people that have said, I hosted my first dinner party.
yeah.
I had my first driveway gathering, and I didn't realize that one of my neighbors is distantly related, and all these types of things I hear people say. They simply don't know because they've never made connection.
Yeah.
But even in our own life, as we started ringing doorbells, making connection with neighbors around us, fairly early on, discovered that one of my neighbors was a hoarder. I didn't know that from the outside of the house, never would have guessed that. Um, but most of her appliances in her house were no longer working, had some plumbing issues, and
Mm,
it was just stacked with stuff. But it took several months before I ever poked my head inside the
mhm.
house and saw that. Now that was I looking for a hoarding situation to try and deal with? No, that wasn't on my list of fun activities to undertake. Um, but it ended up becoming a blessing, a way to help because her kids didn't live in the area and we're able to let them know, help get a dumpster there and, correct that situation that no one knew about because she was living in isolation and didn't have connections.
Mm,
So certainly that was a blessing. I was blessed to be able to help
yeah.
too, and a blessing to her. But that came about because of those connections. My wife, in making the connections with the ladies around us and hearing their stories and learning about them, she hosted some teas and some different things to get the ladies together. Something my wife is a little more introverted, so she kind of took approach that she was comfortable with,
Mhm.
and then my wife had a cancer diagnosis. It was thyroid cancer, so she had a successful surgery and she's
Mm,
cancer free. But
great.
in learning to get to know her neighbors, she knew that we had two other neighbors that were cancer survivors, two ladies.
Mm,
And so, who do you think became her support network? These two neighbors. Who do you think were the first ones at our house when we got home from surgery with a meal? Our two neighbors.
mm,
Who do you think came and checked on her the most regularly? Our two neighbors,
yeah.
because of proximity,
Hmm.
and they had a shared story. She had other people that loved my wife and checked on her,
Yeah.
but because of proximity, they were readily available, and we
Mhm.
wouldn't have known that if we hadn't have tried to
Right.
make connections. And
Yeah.
then, for me, just learning your neighbor's story and realizing there's more to people than maybe what we perceive on the outside. I had a neighbor who's he's a giant. He's a giant of a man, and every time you see him, he just always had a glare, a frown on his face. And
Yeah.
in all the years we'd been here, we'd never spoke to him. In fact, we were kind of scared of him, and he was pretty intimidating character. And so my wife had taken our dog on a walk, and our dog does what male dogs do. He marked a little territory in this guy's yard,
Mhm.
despite the fact that he has a sign up that says, "Don't let your dog go to the bathroom here. But my
Mm.
wife didn't notice, was thinking of something else. And he came out and yelled at her for letting the dog pee, and um, really chewed her out. She came back to the house crying. And I thought about going down and having one of those not so nice neighborly conversations. Then I remembered how big he is. And and my wife also said, we're trying to get to know and engage with our neighbors.
Yeah.
And he's several houses down the street. She said, maybe you should take a different approach. And
Hmm.
so I called and set up a coffee date with him on a Saturday morning at his house, and with no intention of going down and talking about my wife or my dog, but going down, hearing his story and getting to know him, listening, which is a
Mm.
key part of neighboring, is listening.
Yeah.
And my lands, this guy, it was, in some ways, it was kind of like talking to Forrest Gump. If you're familiar with that movie,
Mhm, of
he'd
course.
had it in like an incredible life. And he was drafted by the New York Yankees into minor league baseball. And after 2 months, he was drafted by Uncle Sam to go to Vietnam. And in Vietnam, he was shot out of a helicopter and left for dead. He saved another person's life. He just, all of these amazing stories. He kept getting wounded and then going back, wounded and going back. And he's telling me this. We're weaving through his house, and I'm like, oh my lands, this is kind of unbelievable. And we go into his office, and he points to the wall and he goes, and that's all that I have to show for it. Now he said it's a negative, but when I looked on the wall, I saw 4 Purple Hearts. So usually you're a one-time Purple Heart recipient, you don't go back, but he earned 4 Purple Hearts, which is just astounding.
Hmm.
And but also I heard, he's had 17 surgeries. He has PTSD. He doesn't sleep well. All these things he was telling me, I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
now I understand
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
I had a more complete appreciation of his story and his
Yeah.
life. And so we talk, I have things I'm able to connect with him on now. We visit on the driveway. I always tell people he still doesn't say hi to my dog, but that's okay. Um,
But your relationship has changed
your relationship has
completely.
changed, and I think it has changed with the neighbors around.
Yeah.
As we've just shared this, knowing that's part of his story, right?
Yeah.
And I've had opportunities to be a blessing to him and to help him in some ways. And but knowing people's stories, taking time to listen, that's certainly a ripple effect or a
Yeah.
benefit of neighboring as well, because people
Yeah.
are not always what you perceive, or not always just the story you write for them
Yeah.
by observing.
And making assumptions often, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
So just a couple more questions, and then I'm going to read you a quote that I picked for you. Um, I guess just if you had to, when people, maybe they don't even ask you this, but I sort of anticipate this question all the time. When people ask you why should I do this? Why should I get engaged with my neighbors? What do you say? Like, what's the crux of it? What do you think the reason for this is? I'm
Well,
just
I know
curious.
some of the answers I give. I don't know if any of them motivate people to take action
Yeah,
or not.
yeah.
And Dave Runyon always says Americans are such a consumer society. People
Mhm.
want to know what's in it for me.
Exactly.
What's in it for me?
Right.
And what would seem like a motivator to me might not be the same motivator for you.
Yes. Right.
But there's certainly plentiful research we can say being connected with your neighbors uh, has health benefits, tremendous health benefits, not just for the life you're living, but for the longevity of your life.
Hmm.
Connections with your neighbors build social capital and trust, and that is healthy for you as an individual, but also for your neighborhood and community. Being connected with your neighbors is going to reduce crime in the area in which you live. And that's good for everybody. If you have young kids, being connected with your neighbors around you means they're going to do better in school. The research is there for that. So these, to me, I think there's other benefits beyond that to talk about, but for me, those are really compelling. Um,
Yeah.
especially the building social capital and building trust.
Hmm.
And one of the reasons we kind of harp on the proximity of your immediate 8 neighbors um, is that when humans are left to their own decisions to decide who is their neighbor, they're going to pick people that look like them, sound like them, and
Mhm.
have the same interest as them.
Mhm.
And there's a saying that says, you can pick your friends, but you can't pick your neighbors. And so, if I were to say, if I'm picking my neighbors and I'm picking people around town, I'm only going to pick people that cheer for the St. Louis Cardinals. Because in baseball, I'm a lifelong St. Louis Cardinals fan,
Mhm.
and that's what I'm going to pick. But I didn't get to pick my neighbors. And so, what do I have living next door to me? A Chicago Cubs fan, which is the arch rival of the Cardinals. And so, but there are benefits to that. That's not maybe what I would have chosen, right?
Yeah.
But there are benefits to the differences that we have
Mhm.
with those people that live around us, not just for ourselves, but for children in our house that see us interact with people that are different from us, the lessons we can learn from people that are
Yeah.
different from us, the different perspectives. Um, people still say, they believe there's power in diversity and those types of things. Well, there's generally no better way to pick that up than right in your own neighborhood.
Yeah.
Um, at least diversity of ideas,
Right.
because as I got to know my neighbors, in terms of ideas, I noticed none of them had the same ideas as I did. So, and I
Yeah.
maybe not would not have guessed that beforehand.
Right. Yeah.
Um, but there's, certainly benefits for the community, for us as individuals that way. It does impact your health and trust and social capital, two big
Mhm.
ones right there.
Yeah. Yeah, they're all very compelling answers and reasons to do this for sure. Thank you. So one more question before the quote, and that is I I'm always curious about why people choose to use their lives to support, help the greater good. And so, and I love that and I'm fascinated by that and by motivation. And so when I look at your work, you're choosing to use your time and your energy and you pour your heart into this obviously for helping all of us. And I just wonder why. Why? And I really mean that. Why do you think you do this work, David? Do you think, was it because, was there a certain mentor you had or a catalyst of some sort? Genuinely, I love to share why people use their time and energy to do this kind of work. So, what would you say to that?
Well, I could probably give two different answers here
Hmm.
that work in tandem, I think. I grew up in a very small town, 1,200 people.
Hmm.
My parents had grown up in that town, and my grandparents had as well. And they were involved in the community,
Hmm.
especially my grandfather and things. So it was modeled for me.
Hmm.
It was learned. I saw that in their own life. And with it being a small community, you knew people.
Hmm.
Um, when I was a young kid mowing people's yards, and somebody from out of town would stop and say, "Do you know where 425 Walker Street is?" I'm like, "No, I don't know any of the street names, but who are you looking for?" You know, I knew where everybody lived.
Yeah.
And that was kind of like the ultimate in social capital and
Mhm.
connectivity and trust. And I saw that modeled for me too, the importance of being active in your community. And I'd say over my lifetime, that has really waned. And and part of it has been choices that I made, but part of it is culture around me too that has changed. And really, I think I just reached this perfect moment where I was in a position to say, I want to start practicing what I saw modeled for me
Mhm.
when I was younger, the importance of that. And there's been things like the Join or Die documentary that was really compelling to me that led me to start a Rotary Club in my hometown, the importance of connecting and social capital. And then for my wife and I, uh, honestly, what really motivated us was our church added the word neighbor to its mission statement. And there was a sermon about loving your neighbor. And really, It sounds awful to say this, but I left that thinking that doesn't really apply to me because I'm already a great neighbor.
Mhm.
That's what I was thinking in my head.
Right.
And we left the next day to go to Colorado Springs, where my sister-in-law works for a church.
Mhm.
And the following Sunday, we went to church with her, and they kicked off their new theme for the year. Can you guess what it was?
Yeah, I can.
Love thy neighbor.
Right.
And again, I'm like, I sat through a second love your neighbor theme sermon, and I'm
Mhm.
still thinking, well, this is fun. I mean, this is unusual, but again, I think I'm already a great neighbor.
Mhm.
And then it was just a couple of days later, the person passed along the book, The Art of Neighboring, to me,
Wow.
when I realized that, gosh, I didn't even know my neighbors' names.
Yeah.
I couldn't keep saying I was a good neighbor. I couldn't keep saying I love my neighbors
Right.
when I didn't interact with them and I didn't even know their names.
Right. Right.
And so again, I saw it modeled, but that was a very in my face reminder that what I was doing did not match up with what I said my worldview was, and that I
Mhm.
needed to take those steps to build connection and to love my neighbors.
Mhm.
So that's really what has motivated me. And then um, I do want to see Missouri neighbors and neighborhoods thrive, and that's my motivation with work as
Mhm.
well.
Well, thank you for your work. You're doing an amazing thing and it's spreading like wildfire. Shouldn't really say that during fire season, should I? Let's not say that. Yeah,
Yeah,
especially
you have to.
here.
Yeah, I was going to say you really have to think about that out
Oh
there for
yeah,
sure.
especially up here for sure, right? Sorry, everybody. Okay. So I have a quote that I'd love you to comment on. And it's a Robert Putnam quote, which I thought would
Mm,
be a
hmm.
great source to get a quote from. And the quote is just a short one, and it is social capital can bridge the gap between different social and economic groups. So you can, if that reminds you of a story, or if you agree, disagree, anything you want to say about that, I'd love
Well,
to
I
hear.
love the fact that you gave me the quote ahead of time.
Mhm.
And I've been a writer my whole life. Had a weekly newspaper for about 6 years. Writing is kind of my hobby. Um, and so I was glad you gave me that ahead of time so I could kind of think about that a little bit.
Yeah.
I ended up really even writing a piece over that as I just thought about that because I had not heard that quote before. But I love that because it kind of cuts to the heart of what it means to be a neighbor.
Yeah.
Not simply someone who lives next door, but someone who really actively builds social ties across the lines that sometimes divide us. That is exactly what that ties into. And
Mhm.
whether neighboring can be done intentionally, um, but at the same time, it's a little bit of a act of resistance against the ongoing fragmentation that we have going on, where there is a little more tribalism and people connect with people who are just like them, and whether it's on issues or other things. And so this quote really is about transforming neighborhoods from sort of clusters of strangers into a web of humanity and connections.
Mhm.
Um, it reminds me of the conversations that take place over fences, or the
Mhm.
loaning of tools, or the shared meals together, things that build that trust between each other. I have a neighbor down the street who his name was Peter Chen, and he was first generation Chinese American. And he had agreed to put a turquoise table in his front yard. Uh, Turquoise is the color of friendship. It's supposed to be like a gathering, symbolic of a gathering spot. But the deal was, if you agreed to do one, you had to let me come down and help you paint it. And so we were standing over this bucket of turquoise paint, working on this, and he, out of the blue, said, I'm afraid I'm becoming too Americanized."
Mhm.
And I said, "Wow, okay, what do you mean by that, Peter?" And he said, "Well, last week when I needed a tool, I went to Lowe's and bought it instead of asking my neighbors to borrow one first." He said,
Mhm.
"In China, you would ask to borrow before you go buy it." And that, if you don't have social capital, if you don't have connections, You probably don't feel comfortable knocking on doors and borrowing things.
Right. Yeah.
Um, and that creates an additional gap between groups. And so that was a lesson I learned from Peter, and certainly
Mhm.
something I see uh, in this quote here.
Mhm.
Putman's insight really, I think he invites us to sort of reimagine neighborhoods, not as places where we just reside, but as places where we invest in one another.
Mhm.
Neighboring isn't just about friendliness, it's about building bridges, really
Mm.
one conversation at a time. So that's part of what I would take away from his
Yeah.
quote.
Oh, I love it. Thank you very much. Beautiful. So I always end the podcast with two questions. First of all, is there anything else, David, that you wanted to talk about that I didn't ask you about yet?
No, I mean, I think we've covered everything real well.
Okay.
I can I can give one other short story, I guess, maybe
Yeah,
as a
sure.
ending point.
Love to.
I know this idea of like changing the culture is an intimidating idea, or changing the world can be intimidating because even in my own life, I say there's nothing I can do that changes Washington, D.C. There's probably nothing I can do that changes my state capital. But I can make a choice or a decision every single day that positively impacts my neighbors and my neighborhood. And so that's what I've chosen to focus on. I think that's our superpower. If
Mhm.
we all were to concentrate on our neighbors and neighborhoods,
Yeah.
building connectivity and improving that where we
Mhm.
reside, we were
Yeah.
doing that collectively, what would happen? We would
Mhm.
have improved communities.
Yes,
If we had
exactly.
improved and connected communities, we'd have an improved county and then an improved state. So
Yeah.
I I'm choosing to focus right here where I can have
Yeah.
impact and where I
Yeah.
can do the work. And that's what I would encourage others to
Yeah.
do as
Well,
well.
this leads really, it's the last two questions are exactly asking these things. So maybe you're going to feel like you've already answered them, but it's funny that you say that because I literally write, that my thing is, starting at home, if we have healthy, happy um, homes, and then that leads out to communities. And if our communities are healthy, happy, and connected, then we're going to have connected, more of a connected society, And so I think working at neighboring and in communities is such an upstream, very efficient thing to do. Besides being so healthy and good for us, it makes so much sense.
Mm.
It's the beginning, I think, of making really big scale change. It starts in our small neighborhoods for sure.
I love your use of the word efficient for doing that. I love that. And that, because
Yeah.
that reminds me of a gentleman who was a physics teacher. I think his name was Steve Meyer,
Hmm.
in a conversation. And because sometimes it feels like that you are paddling upstream and the process is going very slow.
Yeah.
And he just reminded me that in physics, very, very small incremental changes over a long period of time
Mm-hmm.
add up to a big change.
Hmm. Hmm.
So you feel like you're paddling upstream really hard
Yeah.
and you can't tell that you've made any progress today and maybe not even this week. But if you
Hmm.
keep paddling and going over time, those small incremental changes are going to add up and
Yeah.
you're going to see the impact over time. So that's part of the encouragement, I think, is just stick
Hmm.
with it,
Yes,
keep doing it.
and when you start it that way and those small things at a small local scale, then you get the buy-in and the hearts are in, and then that's more sustainable.
Mm,
So you
mm.
get the sustainability too. So I am totally with you on all of this stuff. Love it. So my last two questions are always, the first one is, I think what you're doing is, I really see it as love. It's spreading love. It's love in action. And so, with that being said, this is the question: with the understanding that what we shine light on grows, If we imagine a world in which we were all to focus more on fostering love, such as in the ways we focused on here today, what do you think we would see? So it's kind of what we were just
Mm,
talking about, but
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
if we saw more of this, what do you think would happen?
Well, we would see a decrease in loneliness, a decrease in isolation for sure, as people were connected in a relationship,
Mhm.
not just connected by a wave, but connected in a relationship, because love requires relationship. Um, so you see a diminution in that. I think you'd see improved mental health in your community.
Mhm.
Probably see an increased level of trust in institutions and the local community efforts. Um, Probably, I would hope you might see a little more grace, mercy, and forgiveness too.
Mm. Mhm. I think we I think we would, because we would have more understanding and empathy. Like, look at the neighbor that you went to speak to. And
Mm,
when you heard his story, I mean, that empathy that just comes. And then I say this, sorry for people who have heard this a million times before, but I say this all the time, that my favorite, probably one of my favorite quotes is Michelle Dr. Borba, and she says, empathy makes violence and cruelty unthinkable. And
mm,
I just think about that all the time. And I think it's true, because we can't then, we wouldn't, would we hurt someone that who we can put ourselves, in their place.
mm-hmm,
So I
mm-hmm.
just, yeah,
Yeah.
I think so. Um, anything more? I kind of
We
cut you off.
n- no, I think I agree. We could every community and every family could stand to have a little more love in what they're doing and in the relationships around them.
Mhm. Thank you. And the last question is just, if you had to pare it down, what are one or two thoughts that you hope listeners take away from our conversation today?
Yeah, those three beginning steps. Go learn the names of your immediate neighbors, find ways to use the names of your immediate neighbors, and throw a little get together.
Mm,
Make it fun and start building those connections.
wonderful. Thank you so much, David.
Yeah,
Really appreciate it.
thanks for the invite.